morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on what side of the pond you're on, and welcome to an Across the Pitch special edition, where today myself, Phil Kennedy, and my co-host Tony Robinson are going to look at something a little bit different than normal. It has to do with a recent news story that's happened in northeast Lancashire that doesn't directly have to do with Accrington Stanley, but certainly a club that Tony and many in the Accrington area are very familiar with. And that, of course, would be Burnley FC, who recently, surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, depending on who you are, sacked their longtime manager. So, Tony, you have quite a few thoughts on this. So, first and foremost, how's your vacation in sunny Florida going?
Oh, very well. Thanks, Phil. Nice to be with you again, of course. And always nice to chat football with you. And yeah, so far the sun is shining in Florida, and the shorts are on and the T-shirt's on, and the beer is cold in the fridge. So life's pretty good, Phil.
Well, that sounds like a great time, and I'm glad that you finally got to go on your vacation. I know that the last couple of years it had shut it down a little bit, but while you were away on your vacation, you got some surprising news about Sean Dyche, and it's definitely been the hot button topic all around the world of football the past few weeks. You also put out a pretty lengthy article, which really, kind of brought some light to the situation. I think it was one of those things where when it first happened, everybody was just shocked and kind of didn't see it coming. But I think that once you kind of look at the numbers, it really maybe makes some more sense. So, Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you to give your in-depth thoughts, because I know that Burnley is a team. You watch every match at Burnley, right?
Oh, I watch as many as I can, Phil, and obviously, as growing up as a boy, as I alluded to in the article, in the '60s, there was no Stanley to follow, and I chose Burnley, and they were in the old First Division back then, and like a lot of people in and around the town and area, Burnley was at the time their first choice, and to be fair, a lot of Stanley fans, Stanley will be their first team, but Burnley will be a second team for a lot of fans. So I think we'll talk about that just as we get through into the podcast. Is how does this impact Accrington Stanley? Because I think there is some going to be some impact on that. But I think, like everybody else, it caught everybody off guard. And the first day, it was kind of hard to process that because, and we'll talk about the timing too of it, because I mean, it happened on, of all days, Good Friday. You don't usually fire somebody just before the weekend when a match is upcoming. And so the timing was a little strange, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Now, that article that you put out, one of the things that they mentioned was maybe the lineup from Friday's match had something to do with the decision where ownership was just not happy with the lineup sheet, and that was the reason that they pulled the trigger so quickly.
There's a lot of opinions going around, and it's like everything else, everybody's got an opinion on it. I'm not sure. That might have been a contributing factor, but I don't think that was one of the main reasons. And they talk about a bust-up or an issues in the dressing room, any loss of dressing room. I mean, that always comes to light when you discuss that when the managers let go. I'm not sure that is the case. I think when I first heard about it, and the shot wore off, I kind of tried to process it myself, and how did I feel about that? And later that day, I just decided to sit down and put my thoughts to paper, so to speak, and wrote that article, which we got some good feedback on it, Phil, because it kind of summarized people's feelings and the shock that they were and surprise that they were going through. And as I said, it's just it was something that was people were struggling to process. But when you've got to look at this as in this business, it's a results orientated business, and as I said, you're hired to be fired in this business, and the fact that he'd been there that long makes it all the more surprising. But I mean, when you look at the results, Phil, from strictly a business point of view, it just didn't get the results. And I'm wondering too, is this a kind of a catch-22? Because the fact he was and is a legend at Burnley, did that give him more time? Did the owners feel that he was worthy of opportunity to get more results? And that's in doing that, you sort of put him behind, put everything in sort of behind the eight ball, because he doesn't have, if he doesn't get the results, and whoever comes in afterwards has only got 8 matches, including today against Southampton, to turn things around. So it's one of those. Did his record give him more time? But certainly the results weren't there, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if you just look at the numbers, and I think that certainly his success definitely gave him more time, because I don't think, if you just looked at the results, most guys probably would have been gone probably sooner. The other thing I'm thinking is that, maybe the writing was on the wall for this longer than we thought, because as I was going through and reading and starting to find out things like, that his contract was running out at the end of the year, and that he had some gone crossways with the last board. And this isn't necessarily a situation that started with the new ownership group. And, from what the article that you posted said, he might have even been gone sooner if there had not been the ownership change.
Well, and I mean, there was negotiations during last summer where he actually did end up signing a 4-year contract. So that is going to give him some financial security, which, that's, the football managers in the Premier League are well paid. So, I mean, that's nice to see that he's going to be looked after. But I think there was, from what I can gather, he was not included in the board meetings like he was in the past. I know the relationship with the previous chairman wasn't good at the end, and I think the new owners were able to secure him to a longer term contract, and I don't think the relationship really improved with the new owners and with Sean, and I think there probably was some tensions there. But I think the Norwich result really was, as they say, the nail in the coffin, because he got the result against Everton, and then to not build on that, just to go away and lose it at Norwich, was the final straw. But why?
Do you feel like he was overly loyal to certain players, and that his unwillingness to change the lineup card was part of the reason that he was on his way out?
You could make that. That's a valid comment, Phil, because he did, and he was loyal to certain players. But if you look at the squad he has, the formation that they play, the 4-4-2. They really can't play much different formation other than maybe try a 4-3-3. They can't do the 3-5-2. They just don't have the personnel to do that. And yes, he definitely was loyal to certain players. And there was obviously there was some criticism from fans because of that. And there was that certain element of people that wanted him gone before. But I think overall people were thinking that who is better than Sean Dyche if they do go down? Who's better to bring them up? And that was my question. I don't think there's anybody better. And if you're going to go down, let's ride out the season with him, and then because he's got a lot of contracts coming due at the end of this year. He's going to have to rebuild the squad, but he knows the championship, and I think he would have been an excellent individual to sort of try and bounce them straight back up.
I think that kind of sums up what I got from that article was that, ultimately sacking him may have been the right decision on paper and made sense. But now that you have sacked him, what's next? I mean, there's just not a lot of guys out there. I mean, you're not going to have, Jose Mourinho isn't going to come to Burnley, for instance. And then, you hear the names like Sam Allardyce, and you just are like, oh, do you really want to go that road? And, it's just there's not a lot of great answers out of there as far as a replacement. So, I mean, I think at this point, they're just kind of hoping maybe that new manager bounce, if you will get them enough points to maybe stay up. Is that what you're thinking the hope is here?
Well, I think that's the hope of a lot of Burnley faithful, Phil, is that you get some reaction. And in reality, they should have won against West Ham because they missed a penalty, and they would have won that game 2-1. So I think you'll see a more try and get more possession type football, because Burnley were, they would sit back, defend, and then try and score, work on the counter, and that was their style with with some long balls going in. And I think you'll try and see the club. The players have more possession and try and move the ball around more directly instead of just trying to hit the center forward up front. But as far as, like you said, what's next?
Do you feel like that was part of the problem, is that with Dyche's system, he had kind of been doing the same thing for 9 years. By this point, he just hadn't really changed up his tactics enough. There was too much film on what they were doing. Teams were ready for them. They weren't taking anybody by surprise anymore.
Well, I mean, the results would back that up, Phil, because obviously you want to get 4 wins. I mean, I know they've got a lot of draws, and they just couldn't convert some of those draws into wins. If they had, if you took 3 or 4 of those draws and convert them into wins, they're not in any trouble. But and this is again what we said. You've got to get results, and if Sean Dyche can get fired because you're not getting results, then basically what that sends a message to everybody is that nobody really is safe. But
how big of a loss was Chris Wood to Newcastle?
I don't think. I honestly, I don't think that has a. I like the new player Weghorst they got in better than Wood. I think Wood was having an off season, and to get 25 million for him, and that when their clause kicked in to sell him. And then they picked up this new player for, I think, around 12, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that was some good business, but they've got to use him. He's a different player than Wood. And so I think, maybe hopefully with the change that they can bring him more into the game and sort of get more from Cornet and more from him as well.
So if they put Tony Robinson on the board for a day, who would you recommend as the next manager?
That's a good question. Well, the one manager that I did like, and I thought he did a great job at Sheffield United, was Chris Wilder. He's got a bit of an edge to him in that he doesn't take no crap, and but he's I think he's used to managing small market teams and developing players. And I think he was asked about that. Well, the interviewer tried to ask him the question after a match, and he said, don't ask. And so that tells me it is either he's not interested or he's going through negotiations that he didn't want to tip his hat, So, but I think he's. They've mentioned Sam Allardyce, and I don't think there's any way of going down that road.
What about Benitez?
Oh,
He came up in that article, so I the author there of that article, he was definitely anti-Rafa.
well, there's some, there's some names mentioned like Nuno Santo, but I don't think they could afford him, and I don't think he would come. Slaven Bilic has been mentioned. Wayne Rooney, but I don't think Wayne Rooney's has enough experience. Michael Duff is a fan favorite because he played for the club for many, many years. I don't think he's has enough experience because at Cheltenham he's got one promotion in his belt from League Two to League One. I just don't think he's ready. He might be a good number two if he was brought in, but I'm just saying not at this moment. And Wayne Rooney, I just don't think Wayne Rooney just. I don't think he fits the bill. He doesn't. I just don't think it would work there. So right now,
he's from the area. He's from Salford, right? So he's what about?
He's originally from Liverpool. He's a
okay.
But I mean, I'm sure he would have a lot of contacts. But when people were talking about Michael Duff, and I made the comment, well, if you're going to talk about a Michael Duff, why don't you talk about a John Coleman? But again, he's got more experience than a Michael Duff, but a John Coleman will not get a look in, and it's a shame, really. But and there's now as a manager that we've got at Stanley that has been there, and for in two spells for 20 years. Going into last weekend, you would have said to the two managers sort of the town side by side, or two managers that aren't going anywhere. One's gone, and you kind of think, well, if can this happen to John Coleman? And I think the answer to that one right off the bat is a flat no, Phil. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a different situation where, I mean, with Burnley, you're at the Premier League level where you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars and things like that. It's just a completely different animal than where Stanley's at right now. Now, that being said, I would say that, certainly over the last 5 years that, Stanley's fan base has grown. And I do feel like if Stanley were in a position where relegation back to League Two was looking imminent, that at least some of the newer fans might be calling for a change manager. But I think that anybody that really deeply understands Stanley is going to understand that, there's not anybody better for Accrington Stanley than John Coleman. And I think ultimately that's going to be the question with Burnley. Is it something where there's just never going to be anybody better than Sean Dyche for Burnley, and we're going to see a free fall, and Burnley maybe playing at Accrington within the next couple of years, or do you think that Burnley is in a position where they're going to be able to turn things around and go back up?
Well, this is the thing is because of the turnover in contracts of players that run out this year, and it is an older squad. So there's going to have to be some new players brought in. And so you need a manager that can attract those players on a limited budget, and also can develop those players. And as I think that's why a Chris Wilder would fit the bill. But I think this is and this is one of the things I wanted to mention, and we'll get your thoughts on it as well, Phil, is how does this impact Accrington Stanley? Because I think, from my point of view, there's an opportunity here if Burnley do go down for Stanley to increase their fan base. Being from there originally, and when I started to follow, I picked Burnley, and a lot of people went to Blackburn, and so there's a lot of people in and around Accrington area, Great Harwood, Clayton, Baxenden, and our co-host Darren Woodhead too, and his dad were Burnley fans back in the day. So I think there's people And you do see some Burnley supporters going to an Accrington match when Burnley's away or playing on a different day, and you will get some people going. I think with the new facilities, a new bar, I think there's an opportunity there to get if people don't renew their season tickets at Burnley and live in Accrington, they want to see some good, entertaining football and have a great afternoon out. This is an opportunity where I think Stanley can increase their fan base. I don't know if you share that thoughts, Phil, or what's your take on it?
Well, I mean, I definitely think there's always an opportunity, and I think that's the biggest thing that Andy's trying to do in terms of increasing the facility or improving the facility is to make it more attractive to, somebody who, like you said, maybe Burley's on an off weekend and they say, hey, let's check out a Stanley game, and then they really like the experience. I think one of the trade-offs, though, is that if Burnley is going to be in the championship, they're probably going to have more games that are at the same time as Stanley and less of those like Monday night games that you get in the Premier League. So I think that there is some trade-off in terms of that.
Yeah, and I mean, a few years ago, Burnley would be at home and Accrington be on the road, and they didn't clash as far as fixture list is concerned. And that changed, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. So whether it will change and go back again, will have a bearing on it. Absolutely, you're right, Phil. Because but again, if people become disillusioned with the team, with the ownership, and then they may just say, you know what, I'm not renewing my season ticket. I might go and watch Stanley. So there is that. Because it will, if they go down to the championship, there will be a drop off in season tickets. I think that's a given. But this leads me into the part that I wanted to get your take on it, because obviously we're based in North America. Darren's in Accrington, and we cover the sort of North American UK market with listeners all over the place. And thank you guys for everybody that listens. But I know when the American owners came in, and I consider myself a North American. I live in Canada. I'm Canadian, but I am a North American, and I'm sort of protective of if people take a shot at these people. And I was supportive. I wanted to get your take on being an American, seeing an American owner come into football, the Premier League and the EFL. What's your take on the way this was done? And because there was some anti-American, sentiments expressed. What's your thoughts on all that?
Well, I mean, I think that what you're seeing is not so much just American ownership, but foreign ownership in general coming into the Premier League, and there's just fewer and fewer teams that are actually owned by an English company or an English investor or whatnot. I mean, certainly you had. I think the first thing you had was when the Glazers took over Man United. Now you have the Liverpool, it could be the Boston Red Sox group that owns Liverpool. Of course, Stan Kroenke owns Arsenal. The list goes on and on. So, I mean, are you asking more in the way of how the takeover happened, or are you asking more along the lines of American ownership in general?
Well, I think it's a combination, because, as I said, when they bought the club, they have obviously had to finance
with the loan and kind of killing the rainy day fund. So my understanding from that article is, so basically Burnley was free of debt. They had 60 million pounds set aside not to touch for anything that was kind of their emergency fund. Then when this ALK group took over, that they took out a loan against that fund to be able to purchase the team and wipe that fund clean. So now they're actually in debt and blew the rainy day fund, and people are not liking that.
Well, And I don't have a problem with financing when you make a purchase. I mean, everybody does it when they buy a home.
Right.
You have to get a mortgage, and I mean, it's somewhat similar in this case. But it's I think it's the American corporation taking over a local small town team in the Premier League, and there seemed to be, as I say, an anti-American element to some degree, saying, well, the Americans are coming in, they don't understand the club, and they're going to ruin all this and that and the other. But I mean, it's a lot like a corporation takes over a smaller business, which I've gone through, and eventually the bigger corporation wants to model their smaller business in their image, and changes will be made. But I have no problem with the debt. And I was defending. I said, just because they're American, you can't just say that they're going to ruin this or they don't understand. Because you got to give these guys a chance.
Right.
And I mean,
now my understanding is, so the previous group and Garlic, basically, those guys, they couldn't afford to do things anymore. They wanted to sell the team. This wasn't a hostile takeover. They wanted to sell the team. And then my also understanding is that this new group has invested more money this year than the previous team or the previous board had invested in players and in the past 5 years or something along those lines. So I mean, I don't really think you can necessarily fault this group. I think that they took something over that the cracks were already in the foundation, the building was already coming down, and they're just trying to do what they can to save it at this point.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, some people are, they look at it and they say that they're blaming the owners being American, that they don't understand the area and the town and the club and stuff. Which I think that's grasping at straws. And I just wanted to get your take on if you think that people are just pointing fingers and there's no validity to that accusation.
I mean, do the Saudi Arabians that took over Newcastle, or was it the United Arab Emirates that owns Man City? I mean, do they understand football better than Americans? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. What about the guy in Russia that's luckily finally being forced to sell Chelsea? I mean, to me, I guess at least as far as we know, these American owners aren't criminals.
No, it's just the way of the world these days. You get foreign owners coming in, and they have to borrow money unless you're, as you say, own several oil wells in the Middle East. You have to borrow money to buy the club. And I think that's not an unusual business model for American owners and other nationalities to do when they buy a club. It's just, I think
ultimately what we see with American sports, especially at the NFL, the NBA, and to a certain extent the NHL, is where they've been able to work out a revenue sharing system and salary caps to kind of level the playing field. And to me, ultimately, that's what needs to come to European football, not just the Premier League, but it would need to come to Spain and Germany and in France and in Italy and all of the UEFA leagues would kind of have to agree on a system to be able to keep things competitive. But I mean, I think that ultimately, if you look at the American system, particularly the NFL system, is the best financial system. I mean, I'm not here to talk about the game because I know tons of people hate American football. Forget the game on the field. If you look at the way that the game is run and financed, it's the best run system in the world, bar none.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a whole new episode is on the different business models and why American franchises sporting businesses are different from the rest of the world. But I think it's just the timing of that. If they go down, you lose one of the top three managers in the history of the club, along with Harry Potts from the '60s and at the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, John Howarth, who had great success with the club and won the FA Cup when he was around, and he actually was an Accrington boy as well. So there's lots of connections with Accrington to Burnley over the years. But I think it's tough. It's going to be hard because if they go down and you sack a manager, and there's going to be a backlash, and I think it's going to take some time for the owners to rebuild that trust, and hopefully they can, and hopefully they survive in the Premier League, and if not, hopefully they bounce straight back. But I think the next appointment is key, and I'd rather them take a few days to get it right than jump in and just reaction to hire the first guy that says yes. And I think we'll know in the next few days who that's going to be, and we'll just see. It's just it's a different time for people who follow the Clarets, and as I say, there's a chance there that maybe Stanley will pick up some more fans, and that at the end of the day, that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is that this ALK group is just that if they're in it for the long haul, and they're committed to, over the next 10 years, they're going to build Burnley Football Club up to be better than it's ever been before, then it's a good thing. What we don't want is them to be one of these groups that comes in, tears things apart, makes a huge mess, and then decides to sell and leaves a dumpster fire. I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to. Is it's going to take us 3 to 5 years to ultimately know whether this is a good ownership group or not.
Well, I mean, if they go down, the value of the club goes down as well. I mean, I know they're going to get parachute payments, and that will help with the value of the club. But I think they're going to have to stick it out if they go down, and hopefully they do, and they can rebuild the club on the pitch, because the infrastructure of the club is probably the best it's ever been, and it's just now a question of doing the same thing on the pitch, and hopefully the new manager can do that. So
I think that the Burnley's probably in the same position that a lot of teams find themselves in when they go down, is that they really ultimately need to get back up to the Premier League before the parachute payments run out. If they can't get back up to the Premier League and then the parachute payments run out, it's probably going to be a long, long road back.
Yeah, and that's the key is the off season is to build the squad up with players that can do that, because some of the teams that have gone down and bounced right back up, they've kept the same squad. I just don't see that happening because it's an older squad, and I think there's 10 players out of contract. So anyway, fellas, we'll see.
That probably right there might be one of the biggest reasons to change the manager, because I think with Dyche, he was going to want to probably hold on to some of those guys, and maybe they said, look, these guys are getting old. He seems to be overly loyal to certain players. If a rebuild is going to happen, maybe he was just going to hinder that too much with his loyalty to his squad.
Well, we'll get Sean on the podcast and we'll ask him.
Any final thoughts, Tony?
No, I think it's been a good chat, because, as I say, it's always nice to sort of get these feelings out and discuss this and talk about it. And I think we all want best for every club, and especially clubs in Eastern Lancashire. We want to see them succeed, and hopefully that will happen down the road at Turf Moor. And but first and foremost, the impact will help Accrington, and if it does, then when we can all see some good football at the WAN next season.
Absolutely. I think, even if it's a few hundred, say we get 200 fans that say, you know what, let's give Accrington Stanley a try, cancel the Burnley tickets. So that's a 10% increase in attendance. So, I mean.
Well, and this could be something for Andy and David Burgess to look at, is that if you have a season ticket with Burnley and you don't renew it, but you come and buy one at Stanley, they'll give them a early bird discount kind of thing or whatever.
Free Stanley shirt. Trade in your Burnley shirt for a free Stanley.
Well, let's not go crazy, Phil.
Well, I'm just thinking, if we could get people to trade in their Burnley shirts and then, have a big bonfire on the pitch.
Oh, no, let's not. Well, no, let's not.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
I think let's throw in a pie and a pint, and then we'll might get some people in.
Well, I did want to also give a mention to Mike Landers, who is the author of the article on Sean Dyche that we referenced so many times here in the podcast, and thank you again for posting that out, Tony, because you're a Burnley expert through and through, and by no means am I. So that article really got me caught up to speed on everything that was going on there.
Yeah, it's like you just want the best for the teams that you follow. And, as a kid, I had some fond memories of going to Burnley, and they'll always have a place in my heart to with the Clarets. Stanley's my hometown team, and to see them achieve the success they have is second to none. And teams go up and they come down a bit, and let's just hope that Burnley can survive this bump in the road.
Yeah, and all jokes aside, I definitely am one of the people that wants to see Burnley be successful. It's a historic club, and it's the kind of club that makes the Premier League more interesting. You don't want to just see only those big money, big six clubs. A story like Burnley is what really makes the game more interesting to me, and nothing but continued success or back to previous success, if you will, for the Clarets.
Well, I think one of the things that some of the experts and pundits will say, they'll talk about the size of the town of Burnley, and that most of the town could fit inside of
70,000, isn't it?
I think it's smaller than that, Phil, to be honest with you. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think what people miss is that a lot of Burnley supporters are from outside the town of Burnley. Obviously, everybody in Burnley that's a football fan supports the Clarets, but they do draw from a lot of areas. If you go sort of a northeast and there's in towards Yorkshire, there's really no other teams, and so they do draw from lots of area, including the Hyndburn area, and I think that's why it's. There's an opportunity for other fans to see some good football at the WAM. But I just looked it up, and so Burnley, the borough of Burnley proper, the population is estimated at 88,920, and just to kind of put that into perspective, here in Phoenix, Arizona, where I live at, inside Phoenix proper, the population is a little over 2 million, but then there's, I believe, between 9 or 11 suburbs surrounding Phoenix that all have a population that it's in excess of 100,000. So in this county that I live in alone, there's 12 cities larger than Burnley. So that kind of puts things into perspective. Just how small 89,000 is. Yep. Yeah. Well, it's hopefully there's better days ahead, and it's been good catching up with you, Phil, and talking about the news of football, because at the end of the day, we're all football fans, and when there's a club right next door to Accrington that's affected, I think it's worth talking about.
Oh, without a doubt. And I've enjoyed this conversation immensely, and also enjoyed getting caught up on Burnley, because I'll admit that they're one of the Premier League teams that maybe I haven't followed as closely as some of the others. And, just reading through, I think that it's definitely a long road ahead for Burnley, but I think that the club will persevere, and, within the next few years, we'll see them back in the Premier League, I hope.
Yeah, I think, and we've had several crossover episodes that of people that have played for Burnley, or owners, chairman, and various people that have been involved with the club, and they've been successful podcasts for us. So we know there's good football people, fans that follow Burnley, and hopefully they will enjoy our discussion today. And again, thanks for doing this, Phil, and looking forward to catching up with you again in the near future. Because I guess we're gonna be meeting up for end of the season review, and I'm looking forward to doing that one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Next week, Darren's going to be back with us, and we're going to do an across the pub season roundup on Accrington Stanley for a year that maybe hasn't reached the heights that we hoped, but ultimately we'll see us stay in League One again next year, which is the main objective. And until then, Tony, on 3, 1, 2, 3, on Stanley, on. Cheers.
Cheers, Phil.